Thank you very much for coming. I suppose I don't really need to stand at the podium here since I'm mic'd up. Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate you sticking it out to the bitter end to come to our session. And I would like to introduce the panel here. Renee, Franzwa, the product manager for education from Unity, and Mark Atkinson, the CEO for Mursion, and Umar Arshad, the head of growth for AR and VR products from PTC from here in Boston. Before we get started, I would like to ask you all a little bit about where you're at in the universe of AR and VR in education, just so that we can kind of normalize on how to talk about this here. So my question for you is, please, raise your hands. Who amongst you here is using AR and VR in your teaching, or it's being used in your school districts or what have you, whatever your position is? All right, anyone doing any development work? Anyone here to just simply learn what this is all about? Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. All right, there you go. I would like to ask the panelists to say a few words, introduce themselves a little bit, and then I will prompt them with a couple of questions, and then we will have you all ask whatever questions you have for them. So let's start with Renee, and if you would like to have them load up your slides, you're more than welcome to do that.
So I'm with Unity Technologies. The microphone is working. Raise your hand if you're familiar with Unity Technologies. Okay, so that sounds like, and if you're not, that's about the other half. And so Unity is basically a software. It's been around for about 15 years. It started in game design. And so now it's really a premier software to develop AR, VR. I'm going to go through this really quickly, but I want to just give you an introduction, because hopefully this will help for those that aren't familiar, and those that are familiar, maybe it'll spike some new creative ideas, or spark. Okay, click. Cool. So this is the fast forward industrial revolution. This is a standard, I think, for the whole conference that we're moving beyond just the access to Wi-Fi now, but it's really creating whole experiences. And what is that new industry going to look like? Hopefully in 10 years, all of you will raise your hand and know and be working with some form of AR, maybe even VR, but we'll get to that. This is tiny, but you'll see Unity Developer is up there in the top 10, and all of these jobs didn't exist, even 10, 15 years ago. So this is a common topic if you've been on any of the panels. This is probably not new information to you, but this is one of the things that we're trying to think about, and how is it that AR and VR development and Unity, how are we serving to teach people this new skill and making sure that they're advancing in their career and advancing in paychecks? So market research, right? Take this all with a grain of salt, but I've seen rates around 50 billion by 2025, 100 billion by 2030, but there's a lot of money in this industry, and it's just blowing up. And so what's the great opportunity here is the salary opportunities. And just on a personal note, I came into this space about a year ago. I've worked sort of oscillated between nonprofit and working in higher ed to working at ed tech companies, sort of bridging this digital skill set, this technical skill set to real world experience and paychecks. And so that's sort of my passion point and why I'm at Unity and why I'm here doing this. So this information I think is really interesting. I was at General Assembly, if you're familiar, helping developers really get into companies and turn that really rigorous learning into rigorous work and real money. And Unity is really, these paychecks are really showing up, and around the world too. This is a bit of an older chart, but these are the fields where you're seeing more AR and VR. I'm going to get to some of the bigger points here. The A in STEAM is where this space really speaks to me. It's that combination of those technical skills and the creativity. A lot of people start in game design by clipping out cardboard pieces or making origami pieces or something, right? And it's physical, but then you figure out a way to build it out and scale it through technology, and you're really using all facets of your brain. And so even if it's not in Unity, the concepts of learning these skills, it's a real whole person and a very agile skill set that you can use in a long-term career. I'm going to go to, okay, here's the, back. So what are XR is sort of X is your holding place, like any sort of mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality. So that's what these letters stand for. You'll see different kinds of goggles. I think Magic Leap was out there. VR headsets. The new ones have like hand pieces, so it's really, there's like full-on body things now. It's a lot of different ways that the technology, the hardware is approaching this. And the software is just barely keeping up. There's so little out there yet. But the way that it's being practically used is really, really a huge variety. And it's going way beyond gaming. So this is kind of when people talk about AR, everybody starts with Pokemon Go. But it's way beyond gaming now. I'm going to go through these. If anybody's seen The Lion King, they did modeling off of the animals in order to recreate them. And it's what they call real-time 3D responsive design. And filmmaking. So film and media, marketing is huge. A lot of training, safety workshops, as well as it's a very personal experience to go through something like diversity and inclusion training. So you can really create very personal experiences that replicate these real world elements. We're really big at Sundance. I think like 90% of the Sundance VR is developed on Unity. Autonomous vehicles, if you think about that 3D modeling, a lot of that's developed with AR, VR. If you're familiar with Childish Gambino, Donald Glover, projection art and music, it's really engaging people, and then they create games out of it so that you can extend an in-person experience to something at home. I'm gonna stop here, but there's so many examples. These are really fun. My mom's an interior designer, so this one always gives me a kick, where you just swipe and you can change out to a beautiful new color on your wall. Medicine is just booming. If anybody talked to one of the groups out here, like pharmacology is really building new safety nets, and the expensive cadavers, all of that can be diminished with the operational of new VR. And when new rules go out, it gets pushed right away to the software. So it's really quick and easy to update. Architecture, engineering, and construction, a lot of safety work, a lot of modeling. We have big partnerships with Autodesk. More vehicle stuff. If you recognize any of these platforms, Unity is partnered with all of these. And so, again, Unity is this underlying software. It's very complicated. It's very hard to learn, and we're trying to make it easier so that, because there's so many ways to offer it out, and we've got plugins for all of this. I think that's me. That was a long session. Mark.
No, that was great. And so I'm Mark Atkinson. I'm the CEO of Mursion, and we're built in Unity. And so I'm a huge fan of what it makes possible. Do I click ahead?
In the back, will you, switch over to Mark's slides, please? Thank you. Just hang on. I think they're on it.
So Mursion is so I'm going to introduce another vocabulary word, because these things all get lumped in together. We do simulations. Now, we do simulations in VR, but given the installed base of where headsets are these days, we also do them on a laptop. We are asked more often to put them on a tablet or to put them on a phone than we are to put them in a headset. But I would say for the first time in the 4 years of our existence, we have large companies now coming and saying we want to do orders for headsets sort of system-wide. That is a fairly new development. We actually, our home is in education, but the lion's share of our business is in corporate learning and in healthcare right now. But we started as a teaching simulator, and we actually now are embedded, I'll say in a minute, in 2 of the largest online universities. Western Governors University, for those of you that are familiar with it, is embedding Mursion simulations into all of their Teachers College courses and in all their nursing courses. And Walden University is doing the same thing around nursing right now. So we're getting a lot of traction in those areas. We do a lot around D&I. As Renee said, this is an application that I think a lot of people to empathize and learn to experience discriminatory behavior or microaggressions and how to behave in those contexts. And we do a ton around sort of sales and customer service kind of work. Now, the way we do it is a kind of man bites dog approach to scaling a business. We are not believers that natural language processing today can emulate the kind of difficult conversations that people have in the workplace. If you think about it, if the first thing you give your iPhone to your 5-year-old, they break Siri by asking it a preposterous question. So and of course in real life, right? In real life, when you actually have to give feedback to a colleague or a coworker, and they get upset, you can't imagine AI sort of being able to handle that conversation and promote the emotion. So we're simulating these difficult conversations, and we do it by an AI-driven system that morphs the identity of a human, and we have a network of improv people around the world who do this, inhabiting avatars. And it works that actually a single human can inhabit a whole scene of characters, and we can morph their voice and their image into a set of characters I'll show you in a minute. We machine learn those experiences over and over again, and the AI gets smarter and smarter. And we are focusing, it's gotten so good that the humans are now essentially hands-free. It's not like they're in a green screen, if you've seen people do that in live time doing it. They're just having a Skype call with somebody else. But you can create the sort of situational plausibility that I'm on the factory floor, I'm in a Starbucks front end, and the latte machines are going wild, and somebody's about to run out with all the sugar, and I've got to decide, do I let it go or do I actually have that tough conversation that you can't do that in the middle of the restaurant? Like those kinds of things we can make happen in VR. So, and we run analytics on those experiences all the time. We've done a lot of studies, both funded by, in the education work, the Gates Foundation piloted this work to see whether or not we could change teacher practice in real time. And we're releasing one soon that shows even bigger effect sizes of doing this, and that you can translate changed practice from the simulator into classrooms, and that it persists over time. And with a little bit of extra dosage, it actually even boosts over time. These areas are the areas I described that we're doing it. This is what it kind of looks like. It's hard to simulate an entire classroom of 30 kids, but we're really good at simulating a pod of kids. And so these come from a product that we built with ETS to do a new teacher licensure system based entirely on performance assessments and simulation. That's middle school. We do a lot of work around diversity and inclusion and working with special needs kids. So this is actually a project here that the Department of Ed in Massachusetts funded to create strategies for teachers to work with children with autism. That boy in the middle is an autistic boy. And if you're gonna practice getting it right, like practicing on fake kids is a lot safer than practicing on real kids, which is of course what happens all the time. And we do a whole lot around giving, in education, we do a lot around how do you give feedback to another coworker, usually a principal to a teacher. Family conferences. One area where teachers get no practice is dealing with tough parents. A lot of stuff on ed leadership. We do it in 3 models, a private practice, we do a virtual fishbowl, and then a lot of ed schools just set up a big screen and people model and give feedback to one another. That's where we're working in education right now. These are some of the districts. We don't do a lot of district work just yet. And these are some of the strategic partners that we work with in education. And that's Mursion.
I don't have slides.
Umar?
Okay.
Okay, I don't have slides, so that I'll keep it quick, and then we can get to the conversation. So my name is Umar Arshad. I'm the head of growth for AR at PTC. PTC's AR division is called Vuforia. So how many of you guys are familiar with Vuforia? Okay, not that many. I would expect more hands to go up. Because Vuforia is, if this was a world of AR developers, I think everybody would raise their hands along with the Unity as a toolkit that they've used. So Vuforia, we have a software development kit that is the most widely adopted AR SDK, computer vision SDK in the world. So 2/3 of all AR apps on any app store are powered by our computer vision and our augmented reality development kit. So we're prevalent. We've been around for a while in terms of we're kind of the pioneers in the spaces of AR. And so if you guys are thinking about developing an AR, you should learn about Vuforia. I didn't see our name on your partners list, which makes me feel really bad because we are definitely, we work with Unity, and most people when they develop our apps using the SDK, they do it with Unity. So, so we are very much working together in an ecosystem to build this environment. So at PTC, we have Vuforia. It's not just a software development kit. That's the base of what we do. But we've, over the years, built up a whole suite of products around augmented reality. And PTC as a company is focused on the industrial world. So manufacturers, people that service things, people that service equipment built by others. That's our market. So we've got this little business within PTC that's the software development kit for AR, and then we've got a bunch of products that leverage that technology to help those industries deploy this technology in the world. So part of the perspective I'll bring is the perspective of how is this technology being used in that part of the world where it's actually being adopted. So give you a sense, all of those industrial AR apps, that's the fastest growing part of PTC for the last few years. So the AR is being adopted in the industrial world for what I call the frontline workforce at an incredible pace. And I think this year and last year was a key turning point where companies were buying these products and deploying them at scale. So my personal background is I started a company called Waypoint. It was launched out of Boston back in 2016, and that was acquired into PTC and is now, our product is released. It's called Expert Capture. And what that product is really, it's all about the future of work. So it's a product that leverages the headsets that you guys may see out there, like a Magic Leap, although we're not supporting Magic Leap yet for that product. But it's you put on a headset, an expert who's working at the front lines will put on the headset, and they can use our software to record what they do. So we record the process that they're implementing, the visual information that they provide, the audio information, and we use the 3D sensors to actually capture the environment that they do their work. So we basically create a digital record of their knowledge. I call it the digital twin of expertise. And then we have an editor that allows anyone to edit that, add new components, to add in other workflows or diagrams or videos, and then deploy it so that it's available on any device. So on a mobile phone, a tablet, on your laptop, on another headset, you can basically sit and watch, kind of step in the expert's shoes and follow along. So that product's been taking off a lot. So I can talk about that with the panel as well. So just a little background on me and what PTC is and what Vuforia is.
All right, thank you. Talking about industrial uses, that was an excellent segue into what I was going to float as my first question for y'all in the first place, which is that it seems like industrial uses, workplace uses there's more of them, and there seem to be better developed, more mature applications. And my question, and I'm an academic, so naturally I'm going to ask this as a two-part question, is why do you think that is? What is it about the industrial uses that have allowed them to sort of be first out of the gate? And how do we bring that expertise and development chops into other educational areas, K-12 in particular for this particular crowd, higher ed, my area? Take it away.
So I do agree. I mean, I think I have a K-12 background. I ran a K-12 PD company for many years, and in that world, everybody in K-12 was always insecure that they're doing all this great stuff in corporate learning. Why can't we be like them? So when we segue, we pivoted right away to try to actually get into that marketplace, mostly because there's bigger dollars and a faster decision-making process. And I would say that is one reason why a lot of these things happen. But I would also say that one of the surprises for me is that I'd say that the K-12 market cares more and pays closer attention to learning analytics than the corporate market does. It's good enough if there's a positive kind of satisfaction review at the end. The things we criticize about teacher PD are actually in these early days of, because I do think there's a lot of experimentation going on around the use of these tools, at least in the training field, I would say. We're starting to see systems adaptation, system-wide adaptation, but it's interesting about how primitive learning analytics are, and how much there's such a compliance mentality to training that if the idea that people would like training is a huge aha. And of course, people do love VR experiences. So it's actually a little bit of both things, I would say.
I mean, so my experience has been new technology, nobody knows. The theory is if you build a technology, people will adopt it, and that's never what happens. You have to build a solution, and people will adopt it. In the consumer world, you have to create something magical that provides some value to that to the masses. And I think the issue has always been, from a consumer standpoint, the hardware, right? So the devices are the constraints here, and who's going to invest, it's $500 in a headset, $1,000, $1,500 in a PC, just so they can get started in a nascent space. So of course, early adopters are the only people that are going to take off. You're not going to have a massive consumer adoption of this type of technology on the consumer side. The enterprise side, technology for technology's sake never does anything. It never goes anywhere. You need to have a solution. What we're seeing, at least what I saw, is we created a solution. My solution uses AR. When we were still a startup, I didn't say we're an AR company at all. We said we're a knowledge management, knowledge capture and transfer company. And what we were doing was changing the fundamental, or like fixing this fundamental problem of I have an industrial workforce, most of which are retiring. They have this knowledge that it's impossible for me to capture because it's so hard for me to capture because I have to hire a consultant and do all this work. And then it's hard for me to transfer what little I do capture. So everything gets lost along the way. And it's not just a pain. It's not just something I would like to have. It's a pain. My business will not grow. I will not have a business in 5 years if I don't address this problem. What is your solution? And so that was our solution. Hey, what if you put this on your expert? We record everything. They don't have to do anything extra. And then very quickly you can scale it up to everyone else. That's a solution that companies can say, thank you very much. Here's a check. I know what the value is for me. And I'm going to buy it. So I think we're stuck in a world right now where we're still trying to assume the technology, because it's good or cool technology, it will get adopted. The reality is that's not going to happen in the enterprise space.
That's fair. So let me ask you, Renee, speaking of scaling up, right? You mentioned very briefly trying to make it easier to use Unity, which is a big issue for instructors who are often used to developing their own materials. Right. So how do we go about doing that? What's that look like for Unity so that we can scale up?
Yeah, I think this is one of our problems to solve. Accessibility is really important to all of the education team, but the editor itself is still not optimized for, vision impairments or different languages. And so that goes beyond accessibility for resources. It's also accessibility within education. You have to make it accessible in order to be successful in K-12 especially. And so that's a responsibility on us that we haven't even gotten there yet. And I think it's something we're planning on and we've got budgets for, but we're also building for enterprise. We're building for film and media. And so making it available is our job. And then we've got people that market it and making sure that people know about it. I mean, about 50% of the room is still, I'm probably here because they're like, what is this stuff? Right? And I mean, it's so funny you're talking about your simulations for safety. I mean, to put somebody in a headset and you have to give them a safety training to go into a safety simulation. Yeah. There's a lot that's just really just not super functional in the way that, I think Wi-Fi access was, the hot topic 10 years ago because that was a different kind of accessibility. So in 10 years, it might be something different, but I think that's where AR is going really cool places, especially mobile development. We just started our first partnership in Africa with an authorized training partner and are building an accelerator program where we're hiring about 100 Africans that are going to come in and we're going to basically pay for them to learn Unity in a boot camp style. And we're going to hire the top 30 performers at Unity. So we're going to put our money where our mouth is and see how that works to create better learning experiences, to expand that beyond the direct to consumer or direct to enterprise, and really think about like the global accessibility and what it means for new languages and operations and everything.
Cool. All right. Let's open this up to questions from the audience. Who's got you, sir?
Curious to see what kind of applications you're seeing on applying XR in actual educational situations, challenges, institutions.
So, I mean, in the learning context, I can say we have about 80 schools of education that are simulating sort of challenges around pedagogical content knowledge for teachers to work through, where you model a particular cognitive problem that a child has, a particular language problem that a child has, and you basically run reps until you've got the right approach to that problem. And we run analysis of that so that people actually get a certain automaticity with certain kinds of strategies that they have to have. I mean, and there is no, you teach 6 periods on Monday, you've got it down by 5th period. And those first 4 classes were an experiment. Like our whole theory is, you can get 7 minutes of simulated practice and get these reps under your belt before you go do it on the real people. Like that, and we live in, I mean, if you were to translate it, like we do work on D&I even in universities, like the experiences they want is people think about microaggressions, for example. You have this culture in hiring and academic faculty, and this whole culture of change around the way we deal with our colleagues. The moment I'm going to be asked to behave properly is the moment I'm under the most stress. And of course, I forget whatever training program, which was some compliance e-learning thing that I did to do this. You want to trigger that stress so people know what to do when the stress hits them. And life doesn't present you with much of those opportunities. We are finding a huge demand for doing that. I mean, these sessions today, at least that I was in, talked a lot about soft skills and the future of work. And think about tech companies for just a minute. We do tons of work in tech companies, not just to get people to stop staring at their tennis shoes, but to actually talk and engage and communicate with one another in a way that is going to actually build creativity and communication. There's huge demand in those spaces for these kinds of things.
I think so I don't know anything about K-12 or even college education, but I know on the professional development side and kind of on-the-job training world, and I know AR and XR. I think if you're thinking about what are the opportunities, what is the businesses that are going to emerge, it's still all about authoring. So while we have companies that will create custom content that's not going to scale, right? Like we need to create like a Unity platform, but not so dense, right? Not so hard to author content where you need to have a lot of development skills to put something. What we try to at Vuforia, at least the product development or the product design philosophy that I try to bring, and especially in our particular in the product that I brought to market, is all around. We manage everything about how this thing looks and feels in AR. So the user interface, all of that stuff that you're not an expert on, you shouldn't have to worry about it. You're an expert on whatever your subject matter expertise is. You should bring that to this authoring suite and then be able to put together the experience that you think makes sense with some guidance about what is the right type of experience. If those types of kind of businesses emerge where it's a kind of a customized authoring solution for the classroom environment, where you don't have a bespoke solution, you have a platform, an authoring platform, then I think the market will eat it up. We're seeing that right now. All of you guys are not AR developers, but if somebody said, here's an easy to use tool, you want to create classroom training for it, here's a bunch of WYSIWYG things that you can put together, put output, it merges and links integrates into an LMS, you would use it. Right? But right now, what's happening is everyone's trying to create custom experiences, a custom Unity experience, and that's what's causing problems with this technology scaling. So I'm really focused on that as if we can build more of those authoring suites that are tailored towards the solution, their solution suites, then we'll have the scale needed for this stuff to take off.
I would just add one thing to that too, which is that why I'm on this stage is I've been the principal investigator on a project for EDUCAUSE for a while now, this HP-sponsored project on XR in the classroom. And we have a couple of reports that EDUCAUSE has published. And there's some examples of specific classroom applications. So for examples, that might be a good place to look. The one that I would mention in particular comes out of MIT, actually, where it's essentially a two-player game where you're walking through a cell. Right, so the kinds of experiences that you can make concrete experiences out of something that would have been outside of the realm of human experience previously has been fairly fruitful for this kind of development, exactly. Ma'am, in the back, and then you, sir. Right.
Testing. We're on.
Thank you.
So a bit of a long lead up to this question, but I asked, bear with me. It's super important to me. So I'm at Southern New Hampshire University. A vast majority of our students are online. I'm currently tasked with a research project with some colleagues over this notion of expanding access to experiential learning to our learners. So for me, it's become really a matter of equity because we have first-generation learners online. They typically work, so an internship is not viable for them because they're actually working, earning a living to pay for their education, so they can't do an internship. And they're also not co-located, so our campus students can, create a pop-up shop in their business course and go ahead and experiment and test and learn that way, but our online students are not in the same jurisdiction. So it seems like this is the right technology to be thinking about those kinds of experiences outside of the teacher training for WGU, for some of the softer skill things, and I'm hoping you can help unlock my brain on some ways you think your technology could support experiential learning for asynchronous online learners across the country.
I mean, so in that example I gave, we integrate with the element. I think Umar's right. Like, you build a solution that integrates with the things people have. We take that all the way down to the device they have, because in an equity sense, you can't offer a program and only have the people that can afford the newest gizmo to do it. We are big believers in the immersive experience, and we're trying to move people there. But in fairness, we default down to the lowest denominator, which is an old laptop. And so. But integrating with the systems, being able to actually have sort of SSO so that they're signed in, that you can assign simulations that have been built for certain purposes. We actually license the whole system, so we don't do it. But at WGU, they're actually having their adjunct faculty do it. So they're leveraging their own labor force to do it, and then we migrate the data back into the same system. So it is very possible. In our case, we are around these soft skills. So not pure technical knowledge that can be assessed other ways, we're not the relevant solution for. But the application of that knowledge to a setting where you have to explain it, teach it, collaborate with it, demonstrate it. I think simulation is a much more powerful medium for getting engagement than the traditional portfolio assessments and other things. I used to do that stuff. That's how I got interested in this. So I do think it's highly relevant. We're going to go to the general ed program at WGU next.
Excellent. Sir. Oh, I'm sorry.
I would just say, because I think that there's two ways to think about that question. And I think one is, the practical uses of XR for building community and creating these connections and getting this experiential piece. But I would say there's another angle to that too, which I think is really interesting. Unity started from game design. And if you think about gaming now, there's a strong sense of community, creating avatars. And so just one of the things that we're getting going is Unity for Good, and how hacks, we could get a hack week together around Unity being developed for good community driving purposes and getting you into the technology in order to be social, which sounds so strange. But there's another way to think about that too, that I think there's a lot to be learned from gaming as well. That we've done a lot of acquisitions lately that are specifically around voice voice to text and creating those communities through gaming.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I work at Endicott College, and we are a very happy customer of Mursion. Our people who are training to become teachers, I've seen it in action, and their pulse rate goes up when they're talking to these live people. It's really cool. We're also doing stuff with VR, and a couple questions I had. One is about either for Vuforia or Unity, models for undergrads learning it in a computer science context or a course, like what are successful ways to do that rather than they're learning Python or whatever, and what the overlaps are. And then to speak to one of the biggest surprises as I've used more VR experiences is the notion of using VR as an empathy tool. And I just wondered if you could talk about that as well.
All right.
Umar, do you wanna-
Well, so the first part, I think we always need more developers, and I'm a software developer, like I studied computer science, but I would say what you need is those core like technical skills of like how do you think like a developer more so, because it's going to evolve. For me to give you suggestions on what can your students learn today, well, by 5 years from now, they're going to have to learn something new, so that may not be as helpful, but what I found interesting was there's a firm called Cognizant. They do jobs of the future, they look at what are the jobs of the future. And so last year they released the jobs of the future that are going to be the hottest jobs of the future. It's kind of like a little hokey, but one of the jobs of the future was something they call an augmented reality journey developer or journey creator, right? And it was about, this is not about the software coding part of it. It's to use the platforms that are coming out, like Vuforia or like Unity or whatever else gets created, to create that kind of the journey that an end user would follow, right? It's more about design. It's more about more of those types of skills. So I think that was interesting if you haven't seen it, so as just a data point for you to consider. On the empathy machine, I think, so this has been a topic, very early on with VR. And the thing that I can add that may help you, that may not be common, is we've worked with one of my collaborators was somebody who put together a VR immersive course for Harvard University for their like CS 101 course, like that really famous course that Mark Zuckerberg took. Everybody wants to take it now. So they said, well, we can make it in VR. So they hired my friend, and he put together a full VR course. And the theory behind it was, when you're immersed and you feel like you're in the class, you're going to learn more, you're going to retain more, it's going to feel like you're in the classroom. And he went through all that work, and he came back and he's like, actually, I learned that immersion does not equal value. So just because you're in a headset and you're in a class, that was not actually helpful at all. In fact, there's many other ways if you want to transfer knowledge to somebody else that you should. So that empathy piece, I would say, it's an interesting thing that's been reviewed and kind of studied, and there's some research around it. You got to think carefully how you deploy to get that effect, right? So that's my only thing I would add to it.
Can I just add to the last? So do you know Jeremy Bailenson at Stanford? Have you read Jeremy's work on this? Because he's done some great and interesting, so 2 studies. He did one with Roy P. at Stanford around building an awareness of climate change and the environment with kids by creating immersive experiences that develop. I mean, empathy might sort of, this is empathy as understanding, but the data around that was really compelling. And the one that's in the San Jose Museum of Technology that is really cool is the study he did around homelessness. And now those are purpose-built, done for research purposes. So I don't want to represent these as commercial products, but I do think there are some situations. We did a project with the military around sexual abuse cases and frontline soldiers having to handle a sexual abuse victim in a situation in battle. And let me tell you, like the study, the initial data around that was incredibly powerful. I do think these are bespoke things, and I agree with Umar, like a lot of us are here to try to figure out an enterprise problem, but there's some really interesting things going on that are worth learning about for sure.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. Like saying, hey, you get the empathy, you get the immersion because you're in a classroom. That's not, like, if you can imagine that you're just applying your current worldview and then saying VR will help. If you just say, what if you could take that person out of the classroom anywhere, then the empathy piece starts to kick in, right? So I think that's the part that I was trying to maybe poorly communicate.
So that seems like a good note to end on because I'm being told we are essentially out of time. So I believe Renee has to book it to the airport, but I hope that Mark and Umar can hang around and happy to answer any further questions you have. And thank you very much for sticking around to the very bitter end. And
Thank you.
thank you to my panelists.
Thank you.
Guys.
Okay, I'm gonna go run.
Yes.